Wanted to give you some insights from a recent workshop that we held where we had a bonus Q&A session with some great questions and hopefully some great answers. So stay tuned, let's get after it. All right, Chris. So, it seems like everybody's thinking about, where do I spend money on my house? What's the best ROI, right? Return on investment. And I'm going to put that question to you in a second. But, this all kind of came as a framework where we're just kind of compelled in this recent downsizing workshop we had, where it was this bonus Q&A session, and the hands were just flying up because people had an opportunity without any pressure to start asking questions of an experienced realtor, like, well, what about this and what about that? It was so much fun. And so I thought, well, let's just kind of get after it. So let's go with that core component. People are thinking about spending money on maybe a repair, but maybe even something more exciting about that. Like they're thinking, oh, maybe I update a component of the property. What's the rule of thumb on ROI? Like, what's the best place to spend your money?
The best return on investment is individual.
Okay.
There's not a singular thing that we would say and broadcast to everybody and say, this is the first thing you need to do to get the best return on investment. It really comes down to where that house is, the age of the house, what's been done, what leads up to, and what really jumps out when you walk in and experience that property for the first time.
Right, because there's personal, like, oh, I really want to make my kitchen great or my bath great, etc. And that's a whole category. But a lot of times I feel like questions like that have a framework of, well, what do you think, Chip? Right. What do you think, Chris? And a lot of times what you're saying is what we think depends on what we see, right?
Oh, there's no question. I mean, and the whole experience starts when you first pull into a property. I mean, when you and I go to a property, we go to thousands of houses. When we first roll into that driveway, we're already figuring things out. We're already getting an impression on kind of what we expect to see inside.
Right, and we're thinking our eyes, we're thinking inspector eyes, we're thinking buyer eyes, we're thinking agent eyes, etc. Yeah. And that was one of the first questions: is curb appeal. So what's important on curb appeal? And my answer was sort of like, well, it kind of depends, right? I mean, thinking, okay, well, do I put flowers in a flower pot next to the front door? Sure, that's nice, but when you step back and if you've got a stained roof, if the paint looks worn, if you've got some wood rot, if the bed lines are shot, if the grass is full of weeds, there's so much to pick at that it sort of depends on what you see when you're on site.
I think that's so well said. I mean, really, when you think about investing in your property, in my opinion, start back at the street and slowly work your way to the house and get that curb appeal right before you start investing tons of money inside. I think that's just a nice progression. And then when you walk in and open the front door, how do you experience the house? What are the first rooms that you see? What stands out the most? And if I'm a homeowner, even if I'm not selling, but I just own a home and I want to do something different, kind of go in it with a fresh set of eyes and experience it like someone that's only walked into the house for the first time.
Right.
And what are they going to see, and how are they going to how's the house going to resonate with them?
Yeah, right. And some of that could be paint colors, so we're always tracking what the current paint colors are that seem to be trending, seem to respond well. That could be an issue. It could be an abundance of items. We talk about downsizing. Sometimes people that need to be thinking about downsizing aren't people necessarily that need to be thinking about moving right now. It's just we all gather clutter. And so many times we're going into a home where people are accustomed to living there, but if they're really thinking about going to market, it doesn't really look like a product that should be on the market. It needs adjustment. And so those are some simple tasks, and we've got a lot of resources that we can guide people through, in particular at our downsizing workshops, where we're letting people know kind of how to outsource all those things. But sort of the less fun side of things too is the sort of the repair or the non-daily observed items. We talk about buyer horribilization, and so many times you and I, as soon as we go into a house, we're looking in the corners and crevices of a property. And whether it's spider webs, whether it's dust on the ceiling fan, whether it's a sign of an old leak, etc., those aren't really fun places to spend money, but ultimately they're very important in terms of ROI, right?
They're very important. And the experience of going in a new house and seeing things, if your first impression is everything's kind of buttoned up and clean and neat and current colors and that sort of thing, you start to just embrace the house as you walk through it. But if you if you walk in, step into a foyer and you see a stain on the ceiling, let's just say, even if it's an old dry stain from a prior damage, leak, or something like that, in the mind of somebody, they're a buyer especially, they're going to spend the rest of the experience walking around the house looking for other things.
What else
They're
is
going to
wrong?
think buyer horribilization. They're going to think because of that stain in the foyer, the roof probably needs to be replaced, and that's probably going to be $1 gazillion, and where else? And so they, instead of embracing the house and enjoying the house and visualizing how they would use the house, they spend so much time looking for other things.
Yeah, and they're trying to figure out, well, why didn't you see that as a homeowner? You know, what else didn't you pay attention to?
Nobody looks up as a homeowner. I mean, that's
never.
No, but a question I know that you get a lot. People ask you, well, we just want to invest all of our renovation dollars into a singular project. Maybe it's the kitchen or something like that.
Right.
You always have a really compelling answer to that. How do you tend to answer that?
Well, that was actually one of the questions that came up. They said, we're thinking about, the house is, let's say 30 years old, I think was the reference. And the kitchen's really dated, and we spend a lot of time in the kitchen. We just want to blow the kitchen out, make it look amazing. I said, well, that's great, but be careful, because if you don't spread the love of that investment out across the rest of the property, yes, you'll end up with, let's say you've got a nice, healthy budget for the kitchen, which you're going to need because of the cost of construction, et cetera. Let's say you go ahead and do all of that. Well, what's going to happen is the rest of the house is going to stand out because it isn't updated. So there is some consideration on that about spreading the love out. Take a look at that. Take a look at that budget, and maybe instead of doing a whole new cabinet package or appliance package, et cetera, maybe you can piecemeal that. Maybe the cabinets can be professionally painted. And if you're really thinking about resale or ROI, maybe the primary bathroom needs a little bit of attention, or maybe that powder room wallpaper should be stripped. Think about spreading that renovation input a little bit more across the property.
So like maybe instead of replacing your kitchen cabinets, you just have the fronts painted.
Correct.
Or maybe you replace some of the appliances, or just do the countertop, or maybe even some fresh paint in the kitchen does a lot. But then maybe that frees up some extra money to go and do some touch-ups on the things that really stand out in some of the other rooms and areas.
There's no doubt about it, and also not to forget about. Again, there's the fun stuff, like a brand new kitchen, everybody would love that. Primary bathroom, everybody would love that. A brand new roof, nobody gets really excited about that. But if you're over 20 years on a brand new roof, or your mechanical systems, your HVAC is starting to get into that 15 plus years, or maybe even 12 years, those are going to be considerations for a buyer into the future about what the status of those are. They could have an impact on your insurance ability on the property, et cetera. So
we've said this before, and I can't stress it enough. Call an expert. I mean, we got home inspectors that will come out and look at a property, even if you're not selling. But you need someone to crawl around and check the dates on things and check the systems and make sure that everything's working, and kind of get a report just for your knowledge. And then you'll know kind of what you might need to start anticipating for moving forward. Because even if you've got a 50-year roof and it's 18 years old, your insurance company might call and say, hey, just so you know, you need a new roof in a couple years.
That doesn't qualify anymore. And so, but people have most people have a budget, right? And so if you're thinking about it, this time of year, thinking, okay, I'm going to spend some money on the house. It's time to refresh it, et cetera. I think what our outlook is, have somebody come in, do an on-site consultation and say, okay, this is what I'm thinking about doing. Is that smart? Am I going to get return on investment? What else should I be thinking about? Broaden my horizon a little bit, because I'm super focused on the kitchen. It's like, okay, but let's just kind of evaluate whether there's anything else. Let's get up in the attic. Let's get into the house. Let's take a look at the exterior of the property. Let's evaluate curb appeal, so that you can make sure, if you're really thinking about investment means ultimately you're going to get that return when you sell it, where's that impact going to come from? And as you said, to begin with, it's really individualized. So if you want to input from an expert, you got to get somebody on site to kind of.
Yeah, it's like going to a doctor and saying, I want to be healthier, right? The doctor doesn't have something for everybody that's going to be a fix everybody. He's got to see you, she's got to see you on a case-by-case basis and say, okay, here's your game plan.
Right. And the fun thing about that from our perspective, those on-site consultations, is they're often really best and most powerful way ahead of when someone's actually thinking.
Yes.
When you could be 2, 3, 5, 10 years ahead of when you're even thinking about selling. It's more about just getting that knowledge, that input, that market insight about.
Totally takes the pressure off.
Yeah. And the other great thing we've got going on, we've just got a series of them always going, is our downsizing workshops. You don't need to necessarily be downsizing now. You might want to be thinking about it, because as we talked about clutter, we all love stuff, right? We all love gathering stuff. And yet when you have too much stuff in the house, Either it's going to make your move challenging, it's going to make the staging of the property challenging. And what I found, and I know you've gone through this too, and so many of our team members too, and so many attendees of the workshops, is it is liberating when you just go through that process of relieving yourself of some stuff, even just on an annualized basis. So the downsizing workshops focus on that too. So anyway, just want to give you guys a little bit of insight about what that Q&A looked like, a little bit of insight about the way we look at property, and maybe it's helpful for you as you're thinking about some updates to your property now.